An elderly woman from the countryside moves to the capital, believing she would find peace and affection with her son, but she is met with coldness by her daughter-in-law and falls into a silent cycle of humiliation and lies, until an unexpected ally changes the course of the story and reveals truths that can transform lives. The bus rattled along the dusty road that connected the countryside to the capital, shaking with every pothole in the worn-out asphalt. Seated by the window, Mrs. Eleanor held a worn-out cloth bag tightly in her lap, where she kept her most precious treasures. They weren't jewels or money. They were glass jars of spices she grew herself in her backyard, small packets of dried herbs, a few yellowed photographs, and a rosary that had belonged to her mother. Everything that a whole life could fit into those few objects. She looked out the window and saw the landscape gradually change. The fields of corn and soybeans gave way to grey buildings, colourful billboards, and increasingly heavy traffic. Her heart tightened. It wasn't exactly fear. It was a strange feeling of leaving behind everything she knew, her friends from church, the neighbours with whom she had coffee on the porch every afternoon, the smell of damp earth after the rain, the song of the birds at dawn. For years, her son Michael had insisted that she come live with him in New York City. Every visit he made to the countryside brought the same request, with increasingly convincing words. She had always politely refused, saying she was fine where she was, that she had her things, her routine, her acquaintances. But time spares no one. Her legs no longer had the same strength. Loneliness weighed more heavily in the late afternoons, and the large house seemed too empty for just one person. It was on one of those quiet afternoons, when the longing for her son squeezed tighter than her attachment to the land, that Mrs. Eleanor decided to accept the invitation. She called Michael and with a choked voice said yes, she was ready to go. On the other end of the line, he celebrated enthusiastically, promising she would have every comfort, that she would never have to worry about anything again, that they would finally be together like a real family. And there she was, on that noisy bus, carrying with her the marks of 72 years of a simple and honest life. She wore a floral cotton dress, comfortable shoes, and a crochet shawl she had made herself. Her white hair was tied in a low bun, and on her ring finger, the wedding band she never took off, even after her husband passed away more than 15 years ago, shone discreetly. When the bus finally arrived at the New York City bus terminal, Mrs. Eleanor felt the impact of being in a giant city for the first time in her life. People running in every direction, the noise of engines, horns, voices mixing in an organized chaos she didn't understand. She grabbed her old cardboard suitcase and the cloth bag, slowly descended the bus steps, and stood on the platform, searching for her son with her eyes. Michael appeared from a distance, waving with a broad smile on his face. At 43, he was a handsome man, elegantly built, dressed in a suit and tie. He worked for a large import company, had a solid career, and lived in a spacious apartment in an upscale neighborhood on the Upper East Side. He ran to his mother and hugged her tightly, kissing her forehead with genuine affection. "Mom, I've missed you so much. Welcome. You'll see how great it will be living with us." Mrs. Eleanor smiled, feeling her heart warmed by her son's embrace. But something inside her contracted when he mentioned us. Veronica, her daughter-in-law, the woman he had chosen to marry 5 years ago, and who had always been a mystery to Mrs. Eleanor. She didn't know her well. In the few times they had met, the conversation was always brief, polite, but distant. There was something in Veronica's eyes that Mrs. Eleanor had never been able to decipher. Michael took his mother's suitcase and guided her to the parking garage, where a shiny black car was waiting. She had never been in such a beautiful car. She sat in the back seat, stroking the soft leather upholstery, feeling like she was entering a world that wasn't hers. During the ride, Michael talked excitedly about the apartment, the neighbors, the places they would visit together. She listened attentively, but her gaze was fixed on the busy streets, the tall buildings, the hurried people. The building where Michael lived was on a tree-lined avenue with an imposing entrance and well-kept gardens. The doorman greeted them with reverence, and they went up in a mirrored elevator to the 12th floor. Mrs. Eleanor saw her reflection multiplied in those mirrors and felt small, out of place. Her simple clothes contrasted with the luxury around her. When the apartment door opened, she smelled expensive perfume in the air. Everything was white, grey and beige. Light-coloured leather sofas, abstract paintings on the walls, marble floors that reflected the light from modern chandeliers. It was beautiful, but cold. There wasn't the welcoming mess of a lived-in home. There wasn't the smell of brewed coffee. There were no chintz curtains or crochet doilies. It was all clean, as they say, and Mrs. Eleanor didn't quite know what to do with so much elegance. Veronica emerged from the kitchen with a calculated smile on her lips. She was a 38-year-old woman, tall, thin, with straight dark hair falling perfectly over her shoulders. She wore designer clothes, discreet but expensive jewelry, and had that air of superiority that some people carry without needing to say a word. Her blue eyes, the result of coloured contact lenses, scanned Mrs. Eleanor from head to toe in a silent evaluation. "Eleanor, what a pleasure to have you in our home. I hope you feel comfortable here." The words were kind, but the tone was icy. Mrs. Eleanor noticed it immediately. She was not welcome there. That smile didn't reach her eyes, and the hug Veronica gave her was quick, almost perfunctory, like someone fulfilling an unpleasant social obligation. Michael, oblivious to the tension his mother felt, led her through the apartment, proudly showing her each room. The large living room with a view of the city, the kitchen equipped with appliances that looked like they belonged on a spaceship, the office where he sometimes worked from home. And finally, the room that would be hers. It was a small but tidy room. A single bed with white sheets, a built-in wardrobe, a window that looked out onto the service area. It didn't have the beautiful view that the other rooms had, but Mrs. Eleanor was not one to complain. She placed her suitcase on the bed and opened it slowly, taking out her few clothes and hanging them in the closet. Michael stood beside her, talking about the house routine, explaining how things worked. After he left, Mrs. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. She was tired from the trip, but more than that, she was uncomfortable. This didn't feel like her place. She looked out the window and saw only the wall of the neighboring building, not a patch of sky, not a single tree. She remembered the porch of her house in the countryside, where she would watch the sunset paint the horizon orange and pink. Small tears formed in the corners of her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. It wasn't time to cry. It was time to adapt, to make it work, to be close to her son. That night, Veronica prepared an elegant dinner: imported pasta, sophisticated sauces, French wine. Everything served on fine china, with silver cutlery and linen napkins. Mrs. Eleanor was not used to all of this. At home she ate rice, beans, a piece of fried meat, salad from the garden. Simple food, but made with love. Here everything seemed theatrical, a performance of sophistication. During dinner, Veronica made subtle comments that, on the surface, seemed innocent, but carried venom between the lines. "Eleanor, tomorrow we can go to the mall and pick out some more modern clothes for you. Here in New York, people dress differently, you know. We don't want you to feel out of place." Michael didn't notice the veiled insult, but Mrs. Eleanor did. She looked down at her floral dress and felt ashamed for the first time in her life of the clothes she wore. She said nothing, just nodded, and continued eating in silence. After dinner, when Michael went to take a work call, Veronica helped clear the table. Mrs. Eleanor offered to help, but her daughter-in-law refused with a firm wave of her hand. "No need, Eleanor, you are our guest. Besides, we have a housekeeper who comes every day to take care of these things. We don't want to bother you with domestic work." Guest. The word echoed in Mrs. Eleanor's mind. She was not a guest. She was Michael's mother. This was supposed to be her home too, but the way Veronica spoke made it clear that she was there as a favor, not by right. In the following days, a routine began to establish itself, and with it, the silent humiliations intensified. Every morning, Veronica would wake up early, dress impeccably, and leave for her activities. She worked as an image consultant for luxury brands and was always involved in social events, lunches with clients, and meetings in chic hotels. Michael left early for the office and only returned in the late afternoon. Mrs. Eleanor was left alone in the huge apartment, not knowing what to do. She tried a few times to prepare lunch, But Veronica always arrived with ready-made meals from expensive restaurants or left clear instructions for the housekeeper to cook. When Mrs. Eleanor tried to use her spices to make the food the way Michael liked it when he was a child, Veronica threw everything away, saying the smell was too strong and was permeating the apartment. You know, here in New York, we're more sensitive to smells. People have allergies, migraines. We need to keep the environment neutral. Mrs. Eleanor put her spice jars away in her bedroom closet and didn't try to cook again. With each passing day, she felt she was becoming invisible in that house. No one asked for her opinion on anything. No one really talked to her. Michael was always busy, and when he was home, Veronica monopolized his attention with work matters, invented household problems or complaints about the neighbors. One morning, Mrs. Eleanor woke up early as she always did in the countryside. The silence of the apartment was oppressive. She went to the kitchen for some coffee and found a woman in a uniform washing dishes. It was Brenda, the housekeeper Veronica had hired to clean and take care of the house. Brenda was in her 50s with curly hair tied in a bun, a face marked by time and life's hardships, but a sweet smile and kind eyes. She greeted Mrs. Eleanor with genuine respect, unlike Veronica's calculated coldness. "Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor. Did you sleep well? I just made some fresh coffee if you'd like some." Her voice was soft, welcoming. Mrs. Eleanor felt a pang of relief in her chest. Finally, someone who spoke to her like a person, not like a burden or an inconvenience. "Good morning, my dear, thank you. A little coffee would be nice." The two sat at the kitchen table and talked quietly while they had their coffee. Brenda told her she lived in Queens, had 3 children, and worked in several houses to support her family. Mrs. Eleanor listened with interest, asking questions, showing genuine care. For the first time since she arrived in New York, she felt she could be herself. But the peace was short-lived. Veronica appeared in the kitchen unexpectedly, already dressed to go out, and looked at the two of them with clear disapproval. "Brenda, when you finish your coffee, I need you to organize the closet. And Eleanor, you don't need to be in the kitchen getting in the way. You can go watch television in the living room or rest in your room." Getting in the way. The word was like a stab wound. Mrs. Eleanor stood up slowly, took her cup to the sink, and left the kitchen without a word. Brenda exchanged a look of understanding and sadness with her, but she could do nothing. She was just an employee, and Veronica was her boss. The days dragged on like this, heavy and monotonous. Mrs. Eleanor tried to pass the time watching television. But the shows in New York were different from what she was used to. She tried to read, but her eyesight wasn't as good as it used to be, and she tired quickly. What she did most was sit in the armchair in her room, looking out the narrow window at the grey wall of the neighboring building, thinking about how drastically her life had changed. One afternoon, when Michael arrived from work, Mrs. Eleanor tried to talk to him about her difficulties in adapting. She chose her words carefully, not wanting to seem ungrateful, but she needed him to know how she was feeling. "My son, I am very grateful for everything you and Veronica are doing for me, but I feel a little lost here. Couldn't I help more around the house, cook, take care of things? I'm not used to being idle all day." Michael smiled and caressed his mother's face affectionately. "Mum, you deserve to rest now. You've worked your whole life. Let us take care of you. You'll get used to it. It's just a matter of time." He didn't understand. He didn't realize that she didn't want to be cared for, as if she were an invalid. She wanted to be useful, to have a purpose, to feel she still had value. But Michael was blind to these nuances, distracted by his busy life and Veronica's subtle influences. And Veronica, for her part, was just beginning her silent campaign. She knew that Mrs. Eleanor was an obstacle to her plans. For months, she had been siphoning money from her husband's accounts, maintaining a secret relationship with Ryan, a younger businessman she had met at a work event. Her plan was to make Michael believe she was under extreme emotional pressure, caring for a mother-in-law with mental problems, then file for divorce and take a good portion of the assets. But for that, she needed to build a narrative. And that's exactly what she began to do. One evening, during dinner, Veronica began to plant the first seeds of doubt. "Michael, this morning I found your mother talking to herself in her room. I was worried. I asked if everything was all right, and she seemed confused. She couldn't tell me who she was talking to. Mrs. Eleanor's eyes widened, shocked by the blatant lie. I wasn't talking to myself, Michael. I was praying the rosary. It's something I do every day. Veronica put on an expression of exaggerated concern. Of course, Eleanor. That must be it. Sometimes we get things confused, don't we? With age, it's normal to have these lapses. Michael looked at his mother with a hint of concern, but didn't pay much attention at the moment. It was just a stray comment. But Veronica knew that, over time, these comments would accumulate, creating an image of mental fragility that she would use to her advantage. And so the days continued to pass. Mrs. Eleanor felt like she was slowly sinking into a place she couldn't escape. She tried to stay strong, remembering the words she had always told herself throughout her life. You endure because you have to endure. You overcome because there is no other way. But there, in that cold apartment, far from everything she knew, her strength began to fail. Until one afternoon, while Veronica was out and Michael was at work, Brenda arrived for her cleaning routine. She found Mrs. Eleanor sitting in her room, looking at an old photograph of her son as a child. Tears were streaming down her wrinkled face. Brenda entered slowly and sat down beside her. Mrs. Eleanor, are you all right? Mrs. Eleanor quickly wiped her tears, ashamed to show weakness. I'm fine, my dear. Just missing home. But Brenda was no fool. She saw everything that happened in that house. She saw how Veronica treated her mother-in-law, saw the malicious comments, the subtle lies, and her heart ached every day. You don't have to go through this alone, Mrs. Eleanor. If you need anything, you can count on me. I know life here isn't easy for you. Those simple words touched Mrs. Eleanor's heart deeply. She held Brenda's hand with gratitude, feeling that finally she had an ally in that strange and hostile place. And so, a genuine connection began to form between the two women, a connection that would soon be essential for Mrs. Eleanor's survival in the face of the increasingly dark plans Veronica was architecting in the shadows. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Continuing. The weeks went by, and the situation in the apartment deteriorated silently, like a fruit rotting from the inside while its skin remains intact. To an outsider, everything seemed perfect. A well-structured family, a devoted son caring for his elderly mother, an attentive daughter-in-law. But behind that impeccable facade, a psychological war was being waged, and Mrs. Eleanor was the main target. Veronica had perfected the art of subtle manipulation. She was never openly cruel in front of Michael. Her weapons were veiled sarcasm, ambiguous comments, and above all, the meticulous construction of a narrative about her mother-in-law's mental health. Each day brought a new, carefully fabricated situation to plant doubts in her husband's mind. One Thursday morning, Michael woke up looking for his wallet. He was sure he had left it on the living room table the night before, as he always did. He searched everywhere, getting more and more nervous because he had an important meeting and couldn't be late. Veronica appeared, helping with the search, turning over cushions and checking drawers with an exaggerated expression of concern. It was Mrs. Eleanor who found the wallet, inside the kitchen cabinet, among the food containers. She herself was confused. How did it get there? Michael thanked his mother, but Veronica seized the moment when he went to take a shower. You know, Eleanor, you've been very forgetful lately. Yesterday I found my necklace in the rice container. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to worry Michael, but I think you're taking things and putting them in strange places without realizing it. Mrs. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. She hadn't taken any necklace, she hadn't touched Michael's wallet, but the way Veronica spoke, with that tone of false concern, made it all seem real, as if she really were confused, disoriented, losing the ability to distinguish her own actions. I didn't touch any of that, Veronica, I swear. Veronica gave a condescending smile, the kind you give to a stubborn child. Of course not, Eleanor. You wouldn't do it on purpose. It's just that sometimes, with age, we don't remember what we do very well. You don't need to be nervous. We'll take care of you. Those words were pure poison. Mrs. Eleanor felt tears burn in her eyes. but she refused to cry in front of her daughter-in-law. She went to her room and sat there, trying to understand what was happening. Was she really losing her memory? Was she doing things without realizing it? Doubt began to creep into her own mind, and that was exactly what Veronica wanted. But Mrs. Eleanor was not foolish. 72 years of life had taught her to recognize evil when she saw it. And she knew, deep in her heart, that Veronica was plotting against her. The problem was proving it. How could she prove something that happened in the shadows, in subtle moments, with carefully chosen words? It was Brenda who began to piece together the puzzle. She worked in that house 3 times a week, and unlike Michael, she wasn't blinded by marital cohabitation. She saw things as they really were. She saw Veronica deliberately hiding objects. She saw the looks of contempt she gave Mrs. Eleanor when no one else was looking. She saw the suspicious messages she exchanged on her phone, always with a smile on her face, always hiding the screen when someone approached. One afternoon, when they were alone in the kitchen, Brenda summoned the courage to say what had been stuck in her throat for weeks. "Mrs. Eleanor, I don't want to meddle where I'm not wanted, but I have to say something. You are not becoming forgetful, I know, because I see it. It's her who's doing all of this." Mrs. Eleanor looked at Brenda with a mixture of relief and despair. Finally, someone saw the truth. Finally, someone believed her. "I know, my dear, I know, but what can I do? My son won't believe me. He's blinded by her, and I have no way to prove anything." Brenda held Mrs. Eleanor's wrinkled hand firmly. "We'll figure something out. You're not alone. I'll help you." That simple promise meant more to Mrs. Eleanor than any beautiful word she had heard since arriving in New York. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope light up inside her. But the situation was about to get much worse before it got better. Veronica realized that her subtle tactics weren't working fast enough. Michael still had doubts, but not enough. He still treated his mother with affection, still talked to her, still showed genuine love. This was delaying her plans. She needed something more drastic, something that would make Michael believe once and for all that his mother was mentally incompetent. That's when Veronica came up with the plan of the poisoned food. Not literally poisoned, of course. She wasn't foolish enough to commit an obvious crime. But she knew that Michael had a severe allergy to seafood, something Mrs. Eleanor also knew very well. So, one afternoon when Michael was due to arrive, Veronica prepared a well-seasoned shrimp stew and left it in the refrigerator. When Mrs. Eleanor entered the kitchen and saw the pot, she was confused. She asked Veronica if it was for dinner, and her daughter-in-law replied naturally, "Yes, it is, Eleanor. Michael specifically asked for it. He said he was craving seafood." Mrs. Eleanor frowned. That didn't make sense. Michael couldn't eat seafood. She knew her son better than anyone. He had had this allergy since he was a child. Once, at the age of 8, he ate a shrimp at a friend's birthday party and spent the whole night in the hospital, with a swollen throat and difficulty breathing. Since then, he had never touched anything of the sort. "Veronica, my son can't eat this. He's allergic. He always has been." Veronica put on an expression of exaggerated surprise. "Allergic? Eleanor, I think you're confusing things. Michael eats seafood with me all the time. In fact, he's the one who taught me how to make this recipe." Mrs. Eleanor felt her head spin. This couldn't be happening. She was absolutely certain about her son's allergy. It was one of the things she would never forget. But Veronica spoke with such conviction, with such naturalness, that for a moment she wondered if she was really confusing everything. At that moment, Brenda entered the kitchen, bringing clean clothes from the line. She heard the end of the conversation and intervened quickly. "Mrs. Veronica, excuse me for interrupting, but Mr. Michael once mentioned to me that he can't eat seafood. He said he has a strong allergy. I remember, well, because I was going to make a recipe with shrimp and he warned me." Veronica's face hardened into a mask of contained anger. She hadn't expected the housekeeper to interfere, but she quickly recomposed her expression and forced a smile. "Oh, really? How strange. Then it must have been my mistake. I'll throw this out and make something else." She took the pot and, with abrupt movements, threw all the food in the trash. Then she left the kitchen without another word, leaving a heavy silence behind. Mrs. Eleanor looked at Brenda with gratitude. If she hadn't been there, what would have happened? Michael could have eaten that stew and gotten very sick, and Veronica, for sure, would have blamed her mother-in-law, saying she had prepared the food, forgetting about her son's allergy. That night, during dinner, Veronica told Michael, in front of Mrs. Eleanor, a completely distorted version of what had happened. "Honey, something worrying happened today. Your mother was trying to prepare a shrimp stew for dinner. I remembered you have an allergy and stopped her, but she insisted, saying you love seafood. I was very scared, Michael. She really didn't remember your allergy." Michael looked at his mother with a genuinely worried expression. Mrs. Eleanor felt her heart race. She had to defend herself, to explain what really happened. "It wasn't like that, Michael. I saw the pot in the refrigerator and asked if it was for dinner. She was the one who said you had asked for it. I told her about your allergy and she said I was confusing things." Veronica sighed with forced patience. "Eleanor, with all due respect, I think you really aren't remembering correctly. I would never say something like that. I am perfectly aware of Michael's allergy. Brenda was serving the table and heard everything, but she couldn't intervene again without risking her job. She exchanged a meaningful look with Mrs. Eleanor, a look that said, 'I know the truth. You are not alone.' But for Michael, his wife's words carried more weight than his mother's. He had been manipulated for weeks, and each incident, no matter how small, was accumulating in his mind, building an image of mental fragility that didn't exist. "Mum, I think we need to schedule a doctor's appointment, just to make sure everything is okay. It's normal with age to have these lapses. It's nothing to be ashamed of." Mrs. Eleanor felt a mixture of anger and sadness. There was nothing wrong with her, but how could she convince her son of that when Veronica was always one step ahead, always with a plausible explanation, always with that tone of feigned concern? "All right, my son, if you think it's necessary, I'll go to the doctor." She agreed because she knew any resistance would be interpreted as the stubbornness of a confused person. She was trapped in a game she didn't know how to play. But inside her a certainty grew with each passing day. She had to find a way to expose Veronica before it was too late. It was around this time that Mrs. Eleanor began to write. Every night, after Michael and Veronica went to sleep, she would turn on the small lamp in her room and take out an old notebook she had brought from the countryside. With a shaky but firm hand, she began to document everything. Every strange situation, every lie from Veronica, every moment she felt humiliated. She wrote with detail, adding dates, times, and witnesses when there were any. That notebook became her refuge. It was proof that she wasn't crazy, that she wasn't imagining things. It was her version of the facts, her truth recorded on paper. And when she finished writing everything, she would show it to Michael. He would have to believe her. He had to believe her. But Veronica was getting impatient. Her plans with Ryan were moving forward. They had even chosen the apartment where they would live together after the divorce. She needed to speed things up. And that's when she conceived her darkest plan yet. It was a Saturday morning. Michael had left early to play tennis with colleagues from work, something he did every weekend. Veronica stayed home, pacing the apartment with evident nervousness. Mrs. Eleanor was in her room, as always, trying to stay invisible. That's when she heard Veronica's voice calling from the hallway. "Eleanor, could you come here for a moment?" She left her room and found her daughter-in-law standing near the mezzanine that overlooked the living room. The apartment had a modern architectural design, with a short flight of stairs leading to a higher landing, creating different levels in the space. It was beautiful but dangerous, especially for an elderly person. Veronica had an expression that tried to be friendly, but there was something in her eyes that made Mrs. Eleanor feel a shiver down her spine. "I wanted to talk to you about something. I know these last few times have been difficult, but we need to find a way to live together better. After all, we're family." Mrs. Eleanor approached, suspicious. Veronica had never made a gesture of genuine outreach before. Why now? What did she want? That's when it happened. In a quick, calculated move, Veronica placed her hand on Mrs. Eleanor's back, not gently but with a firm, directed pressure. The touch was strategically positioned to seem like a gesture of approach, but the force and angle were different. She was pushing, directing the elderly woman towards the edge of the stairs. Mrs. Eleanor felt her body lose balance. Her heart pounded. She saw the stairwell in front of her, saw the distance to the marble floor below. One more second, and she would fall. It would be a domestic accident, a confused elderly woman who tripped and fell. No one would suspect a thing. But at that exact moment, the apartment door opened. It was Brenda arriving for her work shift. She had a key because Veronica had asked her to come earlier on Saturdays to organize the house before lunch. Brenda entered and saw the scene. Veronica with her hand on Mrs. Eleanor's back, the elderly woman unbalanced at the edge of the stairs, panic written all over her face. "Mrs. Eleanor!" Brenda's shout made Veronica instantly pull back. She removed her hand from her mother-in-law's back and assumed an expression of innocent surprise. Brenda dropped her bag on the floor and ran to Mrs. Eleanor, grabbing her arm firmly and pulling her back into the safe hallway, away from the stairs. "Are you all right? What happened here?" Mrs. Eleanor was trembling in shock. She knew exactly what had happened. Veronica had tried to make it look like an accident. She had tried to get rid of her in the most cowardly way possible. Tears began to stream down her wrinkled face, tears of fear, of anger, of helplessness. Veronica, with a terrifying calm, began to explain the situation with a version completely different from reality. "What a scare, Brenda." Mrs. Eleanor was here looking down at the living room and suddenly lost her balance. "It's a good thing. You arrived. I was trying to hold her. These dizzy spells are getting more and more frequent. We need to be extra careful." Brenda was not a fool. She had seen the scene with her own eyes. She had seen Veronica's hand on Mrs. Eleanor's back, had seen the position, the force, the intention. But she also knew she couldn't accuse her boss directly. Not there. Not at that moment. She needed to be smart. She needed to think about how to protect Mrs. Eleanor without losing her job and without putting her own life at risk. "I'll make a calming tea for Mrs. Eleanor. I think she needs to rest." Veronica nodded, already recomposing her mask of normality. "Great idea. I'm going out to do some shopping. If anything happens, call me." She grabbed her purse and left the apartment, leaving the two women alone. As soon as the door closed, Brenda hugged Mrs. Eleanor tightly, letting her cry freely, without having to pretend everything was okay. "She tried to hurt me, Brenda. She tried to push me. I felt it. I know, Mrs. Eleanor, I saw, and I won't let anything happen to you. We need to tell Mr. Michael. He needs to know who she really is." Mrs. Eleanor wiped her tears and took a deep breath. The situation had reached a point of no return. She couldn't wait any longer, couldn't be afraid anymore. She had to act, and she had to do it intelligently. "I have a notebook where I've written down everything she's done to me since I got here. All the lies, all the humiliations. I'm going to write a letter to Michael telling him everything. But I need your help, Brenda. I need you to give him this letter when the time is right." Brenda held Mrs. Eleanor's hands with determination. "You can count on me, but we need to be careful. This woman is dangerous. If she finds out what we're planning, I don't know what she's capable of." The two women sat there in the kitchen, planning every step. Mrs. Eleanor would write the letter that very night with all the details, with the whole truth. Brenda would keep the letter safe and give it to Michael when he was alone, away from Veronica's influence. It was a simple plan, but it was all they had. One last attempt to bring the truth to light before it was too late, because now Mrs. Eleanor knew without a shadow of a doubt that her life was in real danger. Veronica would not stop until she got what she wanted. And what she wanted was the elderly woman out of the way, by any means, at any cost. That night, after everyone was asleep, Mrs. Eleanor turned on the lamp in her room and began to write the most important letter of her life. Each word was chosen with care. Each sentence carried the weight of a truth that needed to be told. Her hands trembled, not with fear but with determination. It was her last chance to be heard, to be believed, to save her own life and the relationship with the son she loved so much. The letter was finished in the early hours of the morning. 3 pages handwritten, in a shaky but firm script, where Mrs. Eleanor poured out all the truth she had been holding in for months. Every humiliation, every lie, every situation fabricated by Veronica was there, documented with precise detail. She wrote about the hidden objects, the shrimp stew, the malicious comments, and especially about the attempt to push her down the stairs. The letter ended with a sentence that summarized all her suffering. "My son, I have never doubted your love for me, but I need you to see who is truly by your side. Your mother who loves you more than anything in this life, Eleanor." She folded the pages carefully, placed them in an envelope, and hid it under her mattress. The next day when Brenda arrived, she would give it to her. It was her only plan, her only hope. She lay down on the bed, exhausted but couldn't sleep. The fear of what might happen, the anxiety of waiting, all of it kept her mind awake even when her body begged for rest. The next day was Monday. Michael left early for work as usual. Veronica had been strangely silent since the incident on the stairs. She paced the apartment with her phone glued to her hand, typing messages frantically. Mrs. Eleanor watched her from a distance, keeping a safe distance. She no longer trusted being alone with her daughter-in-law under any circumstances. When Brenda arrived around 9 in the morning, Mrs. Eleanor waited for the right moment. Veronica had gone out for a client meeting, and they were finally alone. With trembling hands, she gave the envelope to Brenda. "This letter is for Michael. Everything is written here, everything she's done to me. But you can only give it to him when he's alone, when she's not around. It's important, Brenda, very important." Brenda held the envelope carefully, as if holding something sacred. "You can count on me, Mrs. Eleanor. I'll guard it with my life and deliver it at the right time. Mr. Michael will know everything, I promise." She put the letter inside her purse, deep down where no one would find it. The two exchanged a look of complicity, of two women fighting together against an injustice. It was a silent but powerful alliance. But Veronica was even further ahead than they imagined. She had realized that Brenda was becoming a threat, an inconvenient witness to her actions, and she had devised a plan to neutralize this variable as well. That same afternoon, when she returned home, she called Brenda for a private conversation in the kitchen. "Brenda, I was thinking of making some changes to the house routine. I don't think we'll need your services 3 times a week anymore. Twice is more than enough. So starting next week, you'll only come on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Is that okay?" Brenda's heart sank. She knew exactly what that meant. Veronica was reducing her presence in the house to have more control over Mrs. Eleanor, to be able to act without witnesses. But she couldn't show resistance without raising suspicion. "That's fine, Mrs. Veronica, whatever you prefer." Veronica smiled with satisfaction. Another piece on the board moved in her favor, but she still had one decisive move to make: the doctor's appointment. That week, Michael scheduled an appointment with a neurologist to assess his mother's mental health. He was genuinely worried. The incidents had been piling up, and Veronica was always there to remind him of every forgotten item, every moment of confusion, every strange situation. In his mind, taking his mother to the doctor was an act of care, of filial responsibility. What he didn't know was that the doctor Veronica had chosen was Dr. Oswald Morgan, her uncle, her mother's older brother. A respected man in the medical field, owner of a private clinic that served the New York elite. Veronica had spoken to him days before, preparing the ground, telling a distorted version of the situation. "Uncle Oswald, I'm very worried about my mother-in-law. She's having episodes of mental confusion more and more frequently. She forgets where she puts things, doesn't remember conversations, gets disoriented. Michael is blind because she's his mother, you know how it is. But I think she needs specialized care before something serious happens. She could hurt herself, she could go out on the street and get lost. Could you evaluate her and give a realistic diagnosis?" The doctor, trusting his niece and believing he was doing what was best for everyone involved, agreed to conduct a thorough evaluation. But he had already been influenced before even meeting the patient. The seed of doubt was already planted in his mind. The appointment was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Michael left work early to accompany his mother. In the car, he tried to reassure her. "Mom, you don't need to be nervous. It's just a routine checkup. The doctor is very good. He'll just do some simple tests, and that's it. It's to take care of you." Mrs. Eleanor looked out the car window, her heart heavy. She knew this was another of Veronica's schemes. But what could she do? If she refused to go, it would look like resistance from someone with something to hide. If she went, she risked being diagnosed with something she didn't have. She was trapped again. The clinic was luxurious with impeccable white walls, modern furniture, and the smell of hospital-grade cleaner in the air. They were greeted by a receptionist who led them to Dr. Oswald's office. He was a man in his 60s with greying hair, glasses, and a starched white coat. He greeted everyone with professional cordiality. "Mrs. Eleanor, a pleasure to meet you. I'm Dr. Oswald Morgan. I'm just here today to chat a little and do some simple tests, okay? Nothing to worry about." Veronica and Michael stayed in the waiting room, while Mrs. Eleanor went into the office alone for the evaluation. The doctor began with basic questions: full name, date of birth, address. Mrs. Eleanor answered everything correctly, with clarity and precision. Then came the memory tests, repeating sequences of numbers, remembering 3 words after a few minutes, drawing a clock showing a specific time. She passed all the tests with no difficulty. Her mind was lucid, functioning perfectly. The doctor seemed surprised but maintained a neutral expression. When the tests were over, he made some notes in her file and then began to ask more targeted questions. "Mrs. Eleanor, tell me something. Have you noticed any confusion lately? Forgetfulness, disorientation, difficulty remembering conversations or where you put objects?" Mrs. Eleanor took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. She could lie, say yes, she was confused, to please what they expected of her. Or she could tell the truth knowing she might not be believed. She chose the truth. "No, doctor. I don't have any of that. My memory is good, thank God. What's been happening is that my daughter-in-law has been inventing situations to make my son believe I'm sick. She hides objects and says I did it. She tells lies about things that never happened. She's making me look crazy when I'm not." The doctor adjusted his glasses, clearly uncomfortable with that statement. It was exactly the kind of speech that patients with early-stage paranoia tended to make, accusing family members of conspiring against them, of inventing situations. It was a classic symptom. "I see, Mrs. Eleanor. And why do you think your daughter-in-law would do that?" "Because she wants to have me committed to get me out of the way. She's cheating on my son and wants to take his assets. I know you won't believe me. Nobody believes me. But it's the truth." Dr. Oswald made more notes, nodding his head with the expression of someone who had seen this 1,000 times before. After the consultation, he called Michael and Veronica in for a private talk. Mrs. Eleanor stayed in the waiting room, feeling that the worst was yet to come. Inside the office, the doctor presented his assessment in a grave, professional tone. "Look, I performed all the cognitive tests and, surprisingly, Mrs. Eleanor did very well. She is lucid, her memory is preserved, there are no obvious clinical signs of dementia. However, during the consultation, she presented a discourse with paranoid elements, accusing Veronica of conspiring against her, of inventing situations, of wanting to have her committed. This type of persecutory delusion can be an early sign of a condition that has not yet fully manifested in cognitive tests." Michael's eyes widened, frightened by those words. Veronica, for her part, put on a convincing expression of sadness. "I was afraid of this, doctor. She always looks at me with suspicion, as if I were an enemy. I try to be affectionate, welcoming, but nothing I do seems to be enough." Dr. Oswald continued, now with a recommendation that seemed reasonable on the surface, but was exactly what Veronica wanted to hear. "My recommendation is that you consider a period of observation in a controlled environment. We have a clinic specializing in geriatric care where she could stay for a few weeks, just for a more in-depth evaluation. It's not a psychiatric commitment, it's just a place where professionals can monitor her 24 hours a day and identify if these episodes you report are really happening." Michael was confused, torn between what the doctor was saying and what his heart was feeling. He looked to Veronica for support, and she held his hand with a perfectly rehearsed expression of concern. "Honey, I know it's hard, but maybe it's for the best. We want what's best for your mother, don't we?" Michael nodded slowly, feeling a huge weight on his shoulders. He didn't want to commit his mother, but the doctor was an expert, and Veronica seemed so genuinely worried. Maybe it really was the best thing to do. When they left the office, Mrs. Eleanor saw the expression on her son's face and knew that something very bad had been decided in there. In the car, on the way back home, the silence was thick, suffocating. It was only when they got to the apartment that Michael finally had the courage to tell her. "Mom, the doctor thinks it would be good for you to spend a few days in a specialized clinic, just for observation, to make sure everything is okay. It's nothing serious, just an extra precaution." Mrs. Eleanor felt her world collapse. This was exactly what Veronica wanted. Once inside that clinic, she would be completely at the mercy of decisions others made for her. They could drug her. They could keep her there indefinitely. They could do whatever they wanted. And Michael, manipulated and convinced he was doing the right thing, would allow it all. "My son, I don't need to be committed. I'm fine. Please, believe me." Tears streamed down her face, but Michael interpreted it as another sign of emotional instability. Veronica, in the background, watched the scene with ill-disguised satisfaction. It was that same night that Brenda learned of the commitment plan. Mrs. Eleanor told her everything, desperate, asking her to give the letter to Michael as soon as possible. But Brenda knew that the letter alone wouldn't be enough. Veronica could easily discredit everything, say it was part of her mother-in-law's delusion. They needed something more concrete, irrefutable proof. That's when Brenda had a risky idea, but one that might work. She knew a young man in the building, a neighbor's son, who worked with security system installation. Maybe she could ask for his help. Maybe she could find a way to show Michael what was really happening in that apartment. But before she could put her plan into action, something unexpected happened. Michael began to have his own doubts. It was a Friday night. He came home from work early because he had cancelled a meeting. When he entered the apartment, he heard voices coming from the bedroom. He found it strange because Veronica had said she would be home all night, working on reports. He approached slowly and recognized her voice, but she was talking to someone. It wasn't on the phone, it was a video call. The words he heard made his blood run cold. "Honey, it's almost over. A few more weeks and I'll be rid of her for good. Then it's just a matter of time until I file for divorce. My lawyer is already preparing everything. We'll be able to be together without hiding, I promise." Michael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Veronica was cheating on him. And worse, she was planning a divorce, using his mother's situation as part of a larger plan. Everything started to make sense in a terrible and painful way. The accusations his mother made at the doctor's office, Veronica's insistence on committing her, all the incidents that had been happening. He backed away slowly, without making a sound, and left the apartment. He needed to think, to process it all. He went down to the parking garage and sat in his car, his hands trembling on the steering wheel, his world collapsing around him. How had he been so blind? How had he not realized he was being manipulated all along? That's when he remembered a conversation he had months ago with a friend who works in corporate security. The guy had mentioned hidden cameras, discreet monitoring systems. At the time, Michael had found it invasive, unnecessary. But now he saw it as an urgent necessity. He needed proof. He needed to see with his own eyes what really happened when he wasn't home. That same night, after Veronica was asleep, he snuck out and went to a 24-hour security equipment store. He bought 3 high-definition micro cameras, so small they could fit in the palm of his hand. The salesman explained how to install them, how to access the recordings on his phone, how to keep everything discreet. On Saturday morning, while Veronica was at the spa and his mother was resting in her room, Michael installed the cameras, one in the living room, camouflaged inside a picture frame, another in the hallway, hidden behind a painting, and the third in the kitchen, inside a decorative arrangement on a high shelf, all strategically positioned to capture as many angles as possible. After he finished, he activated the system through the app on his phone and waited. For the next few days he would be watching, collecting evidence, discovering the full truth. And when he had everything in hand, he would take the necessary action. Because now finally the blinders were starting to come off, and what he would see in the upcoming recordings would change his life forever. The next 3 days were the hardest of Michael's life. He went about his routine normally, going to work, coming home, having dinner with his wife and mother, but inside he was shattered. Every time he looked at Veronica, he saw a stranger. Every smile of hers was false, every word carefully calculated. And the worst part was that he had to pretend he knew nothing to maintain the appearance of normalcy while the cameras recorded everything. At night, when everyone was asleep, he would lock himself in the bathroom and watch the day's recordings on his phone. And what he saw was devastating. He saw Veronica talking on the phone with her lover, planning their future, laughing at her husband's naivety. He saw her treating his mother with a contempt she never showed in front of him. He saw the cruel comments, the looks of disgust, the subtle humiliations that Mrs. Eleanor swallowed in silence. In one of the recordings, he saw Veronica enter his mother's room while she was sleeping, rummaging through her things, looking for something. She found the notebook where Mrs. Eleanor wrote her accounts and read a few pages. Her face twisted in anger. She took the notebook and hid it, taking it to her own room. Michael's heart sank. His mother was trying to document everything, and Veronica had found out. But the most shocking recording came on Tuesday. Brenda was in the kitchen preparing lunch. Mrs. Eleanor was sitting at the table, helping to peel vegetables. The two were talking quietly, and Michael turned up the volume to listen. "Mrs. Eleanor, I brought the letter. It's here. In my purse. I'm going to give it to Mr. Michael today when he gets home. We can't wait any longer. They're going to commit you tomorrow." Mrs. Eleanor held Brenda's hand with gratitude. "Thank you, my dear. You've been my angel in this place. I don't know what I would have done without you." That's when Veronica appeared in the kitchen unexpectedly. She had a day off and decided to come home early from an appointment. The two women were startled, but tried to play it cool. Veronica looked at Brenda's purse on the chair and with a quick movement grabbed it. "What's this you were talking about a letter?" Brenda tried to get her purse back, but Veronica was faster. She rummaged through it until she found the envelope with the letter. She opened it and read it quickly, her face turning red with anger. When she finished, she tore the letter into small pieces and threw it in the trash. So that was it. You two were conspiring against me. Brenda, you're fired. Get your things and get out of my house now. Please, Mrs. Veronica, don't do this. Mrs. Eleanor needs me. Veronica approached Brenda with a threatening look. If you don't leave right now, I'll call the police and accuse you of theft. I'm sure I can find something that's gone missing recently and say you took it, so you'd better leave while you can, understand? Brenda looked at Mrs. Eleanor with tears in her eyes, helpless. She had no choice. She gathered her things and left the apartment, leaving the elderly woman completely alone without her last ally. Mrs. Eleanor began to cry, desperate. Veronica turned to her with a cruel smile. "Now it's just you and me, Eleanor. And tomorrow you're going to the clinic. You're going to spend the rest of your life locked in a white room taking medication that will make you truly crazy, and my husband will thank me for taking such good care of his mother." Michael watched the scene, his hands trembling with rage. He had everything he needed now, all the proof, all the evidence. Veronica had revealed herself completely, thinking she was safe, that she had total control of the situation. But she was wrong. That night, when he got home, Michael acted as if nothing had happened. He greeted his wife normally, went to his mother's room and found her lying down, her back to the door, clearly avoiding conversation. He sat on the edge of the bed and touched her shoulder gently. "Mum, we need to talk." Mrs. Eleanor turned slowly, her face stained with tears. She no longer had the strength to fight. The letter had been destroyed, Brenda had been sent away, and tomorrow she would be committed. She was defeated. "There's nothing left to talk about, my son. I know you don't believe me. It's okay. I'll go to the clinic tomorrow like you want." Michael held his mother's hand firmly, his eyes welling up. "I saw everything, Mom. I know everything. I installed cameras in the apartment. I saw the way she treats you. I saw the conversations with her lover. I saw her destroy your letter. I know you were telling the truth from the beginning, and I was a blind idiot who didn't want to see it." Mrs. Eleanor's eyes widened, barely able to believe what she was hearing. After so long of being disbelieved, humiliated, ignored, her son finally knew the truth. The tears started flowing again, but this time they were tears of relief. "You believe me?" Michael hugged his mother tightly, letting his own tears fall. "I should have always believed you. Forgive me, Mom. Forgive me for being so blind, for letting her do all this to you. I promise I'll fix everything." They held each other for long minutes, a silent comfort after so much suffering. When they finally separated, Michael wiped his tears and put on a determined expression. "You're leaving this house tonight. I have an apartment I bought as an investment 2 years ago. It's in Greenwich Village. It's furnished, ready to move in. We're going there. Now and tomorrow I'll sort everything out here." Mrs. Eleanor nodded, still stunned by the turn of events. Michael helped her pack a small bag with the essentials. He grabbed some clothes and important documents for himself. They waited until midnight, when Veronica was sound asleep. They left the apartment in silence like fugitives in their own home. The apartment in Greenwich Village was smaller, but cozy. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room with a balcony, and an equipped kitchen. It was simple compared to the other one, but it had something the apartment with Veronica never had. Peace. Mrs. Eleanor walked in and immediately felt the difference. Here she could breathe. Michael made tea for them both, and they talked until the early hours of the morning. He told her about the recordings, about what he had discovered, about Veronica's plans. Mrs. Eleanor told him about all the months of suffering, the humiliations, the fear she felt every day. It was a long, necessary, healing conversation. For the first time in a long time, mother and son were truly understanding each other, without interference, without manipulation. The next day, Michael returned to the apartment early in the morning. Veronica was in the kitchen having coffee, surprised to see him. "You left early today. Where were you?" Michael placed his phone on the table, with the recordings ready to play. "I was taking care of my mother, the mother you tried to destroy, who you humiliated, who you almost managed to have unjustly committed." Veronica's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" He pressed play on the phone. The recordings began to play, one after another. Veronica treating Mrs. Eleanor badly. Veronica talking to Ryan about their divorce plans. Veronica destroying the letter. Veronica threatening Brenda. Each scene was a brutal revelation of the true person she was. When the recordings finished, Veronica tried to defend herself, but her voice came out weak, unconvincing. "Michael, let me explain. It's not what it looks like." He held up his hand, cutting her off. "No, there is no explanation that justifies what you did. You manipulated my mother. You manipulated me. You destroyed my family for greed and for another man. I've already spoken to my lawyer. The divorce papers will be drawn up this week. You have until tomorrow to get out of this apartment, and you can forget about any alimony or division of assets. I have enough proof of adultery and attempted fraud to ensure you get nothing." Veronica tried to argue, tried to cry, tried to reverse the situation, but Michael was adamant. He left the apartment and didn't look back. That chapter of his life was closed. In the following days, Michael took care of all the legal procedures. He hired the best lawyer he knew, presented the recordings, and initiated the divorce proceedings. He also sought out Brenda to apologize for what she had been through and to pay her a generous severance. She accepted with her usual humility, saying she had only done what was right. Meanwhile, in the Greenwich Village apartment, Mrs. Eleanor began to recover. Slowly, the sadness gave way to a tranquility she hadn't felt in a long time. Michael spent every day with her, talking, cooking together, making up for lost time. It was during one of these conversations that she made a proposal that would change everything again. "My son, I know you've built your life here in New York. I know you have your job, your friends, your routine, but I have to ask you for something. I want to go back to the countryside. I want to die in the same land where I was born, where your father is buried, where I have my memories. And I would like you to come with me." Michael was silent for a long moment. New York was all he had known for the past 20 years. It was his career, his comfort zone, his world. But at the same time, what had this world given him? A fake marriage, an empty life, distance from his mother. Maybe it was time for a real new beginning. "I'll go with you, Mom. Let's go together." Mrs. Eleanor smiled with a genuine joy she hadn't felt in months. 2 months later, after settling all the legal and financial matters, they made the journey in reverse. They left New York City and returned to the small town in Kansas where it all began. Mrs. Eleanor's house was just as she had left it, only a little dustier, with weeds overgrown in the yard. But there was life there. There was history. There was love in the walls. Michael looked around and felt a peace he didn't know existed. The silence wasn't oppressive, like in the apartment. It was welcoming. The air smelled of earth, of plants, of nature. People on the street greeted them with genuine smiles. They began to restore the house together. Michael, who before had only known meetings and spreadsheets, learned to fix roof tiles, to paint walls, to tend the garden. The local community, hearing that Mrs. Eleanor was back, showed up to help in a collective effort. Neighbors brought food, tools, and volunteer labor. In a few weeks, the house was renovated, alive again. Mrs. Eleanor was once again sought out by the townspeople. She had always had knowledge of medicinal herbs, of healing teas, of folk wisdom passed down through generations. People started knocking on her door again, asking for advice, for natural remedies, for a word of comfort. She had returned to her purpose, to her place in the world. Michael observed all of this and began to have an idea. That small town, like so many others in rural America, suffered from a lack of opportunities for young people. Most left for the big cities in search of education and work, leaving the town increasingly empty. But there was so much potential there, so much wisdom, so much traditional knowledge that could be valued and combined with modern techniques. That's when he decided to found a technical school. He used part of the money he had saved over years of working in New York and began to put the project into practice. It wouldn't be an ordinary school. It would be an institute that combined the traditional knowledge of the older generation with the technology and innovation that the young people brought. Sustainable agriculture, natural medicine, quality craftsmanship, rural entrepreneurship. Mrs. Eleanor was invited to be one of the teachers, teaching about medicinal plants and ancestral healing practices. She accepted with pride and humility. Other people from the community were also invited. Mr. John, who knew everything about repairing farm machinery, Mrs. Mary, a master of weaving and embroidery, Mr. Anthony, an expert in agroforestry. The institute started small with only 20 students in the first class, but the news spread quickly. Young people from neighboring towns began to enroll. Families who had lost hope for their children's future began to see a light. In 2 years, the institute had more than 200 students and a considerable waiting list. The project attracted the attention of regional and then national media. Reports were made showing this initiative that was transforming a small town. The Department of Education sent representatives to learn about the model and assess the possibility of replicating it in other regions of the country. During the graduation of the first class, Michael was on the makeshift stage in the town square, watching those young people receive their certificates. Some would start their own businesses in the region, others would work in cooperatives, others would take their knowledge back to their home communities. But they all had one thing in common. They didn't have to abandon their roots to have a future. Mrs. Eleanor was sitting in the front row, in a clean, well-pressed floral dress, her white hair tied in its usual bun, a wide smile on her face. Beside her was Brenda, who had moved to the town at Michael's invitation and now worked as the Institute's administrative coordinator. At that moment, looking at everything they had built, Michael felt a deep gratitude for everything that had happened, even for the bad things, because they were what brought him here, what made him reconnect with his mother, what taught him the value of the true things in life. It was around this time that Michael received an unexpected letter. It was from Veronica. She was writing from a city in the south where she was now living. The letter was long, full of regret, apologies, and explanations about her own life story that had made her the cruel person she had been. She said she had broken up with Ryan shortly after the divorce, that she was in therapy, that she had started volunteering for social projects as a form of redemption. Michael read the letter in silence and then showed it to his mother. Mrs. Eleanor also read it carefully. When she finished, she was thoughtful for a long time before speaking. "You know, my son, I spent a long time being angry at that woman. Angry for what she did to me, for what she tried to do to our family. But today I understand that hurt people hurt people. She carried her own pains and dumped them on me. That doesn't justify anything, but it helps me understand. And by understanding, I can forgive." Michael looked at his mother with admiration. After everything she had been through, she still had compassion in her heart. "Do you think I should reply?" Mrs. Eleanor held her son's hand. "I think forgiveness frees us, not the one who did wrong. If you feel you should reply, then reply, but do it for yourself, not for her." Michael wrote a short but sincere letter. He said he held no grudge, that he wished her peace and purpose in life, but that there was no possibility of reconciliation. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt, but that doesn't mean we have to live with the weight of bitterness. The years went by. The Institute grew and established itself as a national reference in sustainable rural education. Michael met Anne, a biology teacher who came from another city to teach at the Institute. She was simple, intelligent, genuine. The two fell in love slowly, with the tranquility of those who are in no hurry, of those who have learned that the best things in life take time to blossom. Mrs. Eleanor had the joy of attending her son's wedding, this time to a woman who treated her with true respect and affection. She had the joy of seeing two grandchildren born, a boy and a girl, who grew up running through the backyard, learning about plants and animals, listening to their great-grandmother's stories of the old days. One Sunday afternoon, 5 years after they returned to the countryside, the community organized a celebration in honor of Mrs. Eleanor. It was a simple party in the town square, with homemade food, live music, and lots of people. One of the students who had graduated from the Institute had written a song telling her story. The story of a woman who left her land, faced humiliation and suffering, but with dignity and courage found the strength to return and transform not only her own life, but that of an entire community. When the music began to play, Mrs. Eleanor was sitting in a rocking chair they had placed in the center of the square. Tears streamed down her wrinkled face, but they were tears of pure happiness. Michael was by her side, holding her hand, Anne on the other side with the grandchildren in her lap. Brenda was there too, part of this family that was formed not by blood, but by loyalty and true love. The song's lyrics spoke of roots that never die, of the strength that comes from simplicity, of love that withstands all storms. It spoke of new beginnings, of forgiveness, of the courage to be who you are, even when the world tries to make you believe you have no value. When the song ended, everyone gave a standing ovation. Mrs. Eleanor stood up slowly with her son's help and waved to everyone with a shy but radiant smile. At that moment, looking at all those people, at that square full of life, at that piece of land that had always been hers, she knew it had all been worth it. Every tear, every night of anguish, every moment of despair. Everything had led to this ending that was actually a new beginning. And there, in that small town in rural America, surrounded by people who truly loved her, Mrs. Eleanor found something that the luxurious New York apartment could never offer: the peace of being exactly where she was meant to be, being exactly who she had always been. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Eleanor and Michael has deeply touched your hearts. If you were moved by this journey of overcoming dignity and new beginnings, please leave a like here, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment stood out to you the most. Every day, we bring intense stories like this one, which reveal the strength of true love, the importance of family, and the ability to rebuild one's life even after the greatest storms. Your presence here makes all the difference to us. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with a new story that will move and inspire. See you soon.